Madam Speaker, the Honourable President, wherever he is today, honourable members, this is a strange sona to debate because large parts of the President's speech are straight from the DA's playbook. Let's be clear, that is a good thing. It's a good thing. Because what we need if we want to fight poverty is agreement of where and how jobs are created. And for the very first time, someone from that side of the House seems to get it. If we're honest, on Thursday night, the President didn't sound like a man leading the ANC, a party obsessed with centralized control of the economy and reliant on a massively bloated public sector. Channeling the DA, he said, and I quote, "Government doesn't create jobs, businesses create jobs. Government must create the conditions that will enable the private sector," unquote. But as we've seen today, what remains unclear is which of these views represents the real ANC. For almost 3 decades, this government has done about all that it possibly could to discourage job creation in the private sector through terrible draconian regulations and labour laws. For almost 3 decades, the ANC has stuck to its ideological guns of putting government and the state at the centre of economic growth and job creation. And for almost 3 decades, it's treated the small business owner as the enemy, doing all it can to extract taxes and exhaust their goodwill, forcing them to jump through extraordinary hoops of compliance and regulations, BEE, and a raft of other irrational requirements, not to mention the COVID regulations. And then suddenly, on Thursday night, we hear a different story. So what has changed? Now, Mr. President, I'm sure that you have seen and heard the analyst comments that you must have been reading the DA manifesto. But I agree with the Chief Whip of the ANC. But that statement needs to be corrected. Because a manifesto is merely a declaration of intentions, not achievements. Anybody can talk about what they want to do and the things that they would like to see done. None of the things that you appropriated from the DA came from a wish list. They are things we already do where we are in government. And so, you didn't borrow from the DA's manifesto, you took directly from the DA's track record. And that's a good thing. And it's also a very important distinction to make when trying to understand why this economy under your government remains trapped in quicksand. You see, it all comes down to the difference between talking and doing. And that's what we need to keep in mind when we debate the positive things that you said on Thursday. Are any of them likely to happen? So you talk about building a capable professional state, but you still insist on deploying unsuitable party loyalists to every single corner of the state. Meanwhile, the DA has shown you exactly what a capable, merit-based state can look like. You talk about solving the energy crisis and ending load shedding, and you've been talking about this for well over a decade now. But as we speak, DA governments stand ready to buy their power directly from independent power producers. You talk about making it easier for small and medium enterprises to operate and comply with regulations by cutting red tape, while the DA does exactly this. The Western Cape government has an incredibly successful red tape reduction unit, and we introduced a similar bill in Parliament only to have it shot down by the President's own party. You talk about paying government suppliers on time. DA governments consistently pay their suppliers within 30 days. You see, Mr. President, talking is easy, but doing makes the difference. And that is the DA difference. Cape Town Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis has promised to make Cape Town the most business-friendly city on the continent and put it right up there amongst the best in the world. You might also know that Cape Town already tops the ease of doing business rankings in South Africa. And this has had a profound effect on new investments, which in turn has spared its residents the worst of the country's unemployment bloodbath. But that's not good enough. The rest of South Africa cannot be the benchmark. It's just too low. Cape Town wants to measure itself against the world and wants to roll out the red carpet for every possible new job-creating business. And that's what we mean by the DA difference, the measurable way in which people's lives improve where the DA governs. Mr. President, you even acknowledged this DA difference in the wake of the Parliament fire when you said, and I quote, "We do have one city that works, a province that works, and a government that works when the chips are down," unquote. The biggest DA difference of all is that we get things done. You talk year after year, the DA gets it done. It could have all been very different, though, Mr. President, when you embarked on your presidency some 4 years ago. You had all the goodwill and support that you needed to put our country back on its feet. It wasn't going to be easy, but you had it perfectly teed up. You were the darling of the media, businesses were falling over themselves to give money, and all you had to do was start delivering on some of your promises of your first SONA. Just a little bit of progress, and then a little bit more the following year, and a little bit more the next year. But the reality is that very little happened. And so South Africa's heard the same pronouncements and promises each year about how jobs are going to be created, how load shedding will end, how broadband spectrum will be auctioned, and how corruption would finally be dealt with. Every year, another task team, another social compact at taxpayer expense. Now you tell us that your government has given itself, and I quote, 100 days to finalize a social compact to grow our economy, create jobs, and combat hunger, unquote. Now, no one here can argue with that. They're incredible goals. But what were you doing for the last 100 days, or the last 1,000 days for that matter? Our country's been in an absolute crisis for a very long time. And it's incomprehensible that you arrive at a SONA to tell us that you're now going to start thinking of a plan. You should have used SONA to announce the plan. And not only the plan, but the progress on implementation. Don't say, do. And again on Thursday, you told us that those responsible for state capture will be punished. But if you had read the first 2 reports of the Zondo Commission, you would know that you still continue to employ many of those implicated in your own cabinet. In your 5th State of the Nation address, you're still promising South Africa prosecutions, yet not one of those implicated cadres has been charged or convicted. Don't say, do. So while I'd love to feel buoyed by the newfound insights of job creation, small enterprises, cutting red tape, simplifying labor laws, supporting our nation's employers, I've seen this film enough times to know that this is where it likely ends. And so does everyone else, which is why the common theme of the media analysis post your SONA was nice words, pity it will never happen. After all that goodwill and hope 4 years ago, you have today become the president of the comforting catchphrase, the soothing reassurance, and the empty promises. Doctor, do nothing. But here's the thing, Mr. President. We cannot have a conversation about this inaction without turning our attention to the real elephant in the room. Or should I say the 64 elephants in the room. And you know what I'm talking about, Mr. President. It's your cabinet ministers and their deputies. 64 of you, including 28 ministers, 34 deputy ministers, plus the deputy president and yourself. Even after trimming and consolidating ministries, you still preside over one of the biggest cabinets in the world. A massive jobs for cadres scheme where no one is too corrupt, too lazy, or too useless to land one of these plush jobs. Every energy reform, every measure to unshackle our economy, every intention to support small businesses is going to sink like a ton of bricks the moment you walk into your first cabinet meeting. Almost no one on your executive would be employable in the private sector. And frankly, you know that some of them should be behind bars. But instead of cleaning out your cabinet, you simply reshuffle the corrupt again and again until every single ministry has the grubby fingerprints of failure all over it. You stand up in SONA and you talk about building a capable state, but you're not prepared to walk away from the very essence of state capture and the incapable state, the policy of cadre deployment. Clearly, Mr. President, you know what I'm saying is true. You know that your cabinet cannot be trusted to get things done. You effectively admitted that by now setting up a parallel state in your own presidency. Your appointments like Sipho Nkosi, Mavuso Mzimang and Daniel Manele to do the job of your cabinet says it all. In a functional democracy, you would have fired most of your cabinet a long time ago. But we all know why you haven't. We've seen the video where without a hint of shame, you tell the room that you would rather be seen as a weak president than split the ANC, because that is not your mission. Your mission is to keep the ANC united. In other words, you see your job as holding together this ragtag mob of crooks and freeloaders, even if that means the destruction of our country. Why else would Minister Bheki Cele still have a job in your cabinet after the spectacular failure of the SAPs to protect people's lives and property during the riots of last year? Over 300 people lost their lives. You should hold him accountable, but you don't. Why does Minister Ayanda Dlodlo still have a job in your cabinet? As Minister of State Security, the lack of state intelligence during and preceding the July riots fell squarely on her shoulders. You should hold her accountable, but instead you simply redeployed her to public service and administration, while the third person responsible for July's chaos, the Defence Minister, found herself redeployed as the Speaker in this House. Why does Minister Lindiwe Sisulu still have a job as Tourism Minister? Over the past 28 years, she's left a trail of mediocrity across 5 different departments. And if that wasn't enough to get rid of her, surely her despicable attack on the judiciary and our Constitution was.